Welcome to the Makerspace. I'm the Makerspace manager, Jackie, and we are here with Brandon Zunin, one of my student technicians. And Brandon is out in, where are you located right now?
I am inside the Kaniksu National Forest in northern Idaho, about 76 miles south of Canada. And I'm parked up right here now by the train tracks, mooching off of the BNSF Wi-Fi.
Nice. Okay.
So forgive me if a train comes by.
All right. Well, I wanted to start by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about your major at Swarthmore, or if you have like additional studies like minors or clubs that you're in? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I am a double major, one in engineering, where I'm focusing mostly in mechanical and electrical engineering, with a little bit of environmental on the side. And the second is a special major in applied philosophy, which is roughly equal parts religion and philosophy. I call it applied philosophy and human factors. And for my capstone on that, I'm focusing on the relationship between the philosopher Rudolf Steiner and the Waldorf school education system. Other than that, on campus, I've spent 2 years working in the Makerspace and 3 years working as a engineering shop assistant with James Johnson. And I'm the founder and president of Flight Club and the current co-president of the Outsiders Club.
Very nice. So my next question was going to be, when did you start working as a Makerspace technician? But you just answered that. So why don't we dive into some of the projects that you've used the Makerspace for personally, and academically or personally, or both?
So when the Makerspace first opened, I was involved heavily in setting it up and building the equipment that we needed to have a functioning Makerspace. And that inspired me to use the Makerspace to set up other spaces, like my apartment off campus, where I bought mostly my own wood and built furniture, seating, counters, tables, things like that. I've also used the Makerspace in a lot of engineering classes to build components, things like that. I've used the Makerspace as an area with tools and space to maintain some of my own equipment, like a motorcycle. Those are some of the big things. I've made a lot of gifts over the years for different people. A lot of them on the laser cutter, some using some of our casting equipment, those kinds of things. And then I've done a lot of collaborations with other students. Also furniture. I made helped one student make a ukulele.
A ukulele?
Those are some highlights.
Nice. So I guess we can kind of glean some of this, but can you list some specific things that you've learned since working in the Makerspace, like specific equipment or skills that you've acquired?
The single thing that I've learned, for which I'm most grateful to the Makerspace, is how to communicate clearly what I know to people that want to know it, and who come to it with very, very different backgrounds. So for example, to teach somebody the subtleties of different types of stain, for example. One student might not really care too much, and they just know they're supposed to put something on their wood thing they made, and they just want something. Versus a student that has a lot of carpentry experience, or one that really is interested in learning more about wood and desperately wants to sit and chat about stain for an hour. So I've really learned a lot, and there's a lot more left to learn, but about how to express things, how to communicate things, how to meet somebody where they're at and not be too in their face or too aloof, and to respond appropriately. On the technical side, I've learned really how to drive a laser cutter pretty damn well. I'd never used a laser cutter before coming to the Makerspace, and I have a hugely newfound appreciation for the power of those machines and really what you can do with them. I'm of the opinion now that anybody that wants to invest in a piece of equipment to make things, to make money, to pay back the cost of that machine, I think a laser cutter is one of the best ways to do it, because you can just have it going through the night in your basement making keychains or bookmarks or whatever. I've also learned a lot more about 3D printing. That was also something I wasn't too familiar with when I came to the Makerspace, but through helping other students, learning a lot from my fellow techs who knew more about those kinds of things, I now feel pretty comfortable with especially the care and maintenance of 3D printers. Because even the ones that make it fairly simple and easy to run prints still require a lot of maintenance. And then I've really refined a lot of woodworking skills. I had never used a joiner before getting to the Makerspace, and put a lot of time into becoming comfortable with that, as it's a pretty scary piece of equipment if you're not familiar with it. Those are some big things. Oh, one of the other things I'm hugely grateful for is learning how to organize a space. I have a newfound appreciation for setting up a workshop and deciding how you section off different tools, different materials, different processes, how you organize hand tools, how you organize drill bits, all those kinds of things, which I'm really excited to carry forward with me into other workspaces and things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. That's a huge takeaway for me too when I started getting involved in setting up these kinds of spaces.
Yeah, the whole science of itself.
Yeah. Can you think of I know you mentioned, you know, your experience with helping students and things like that. Can you think of a specific story or situation where you helped someone and it made you feel good, or and what the project was?
Okay, I'm gonna. Can I share two on
Sure.
completely different sides of the spectrum? So one night towards the end of my shift, it was about 6:45 or 7 o'clock or something. Two students came in, kind of all giddy and smiley, running down the hallway with a big paddle, saying "bonk, bonk, bonk." And they came in and they had this paddle that we found this paddle in the crumb. We want to write bonk on it. And I was like, okay. How do you want to do that? Are you thinking paint or carving? And they were just like bonk, bonk, bonk. So like, okay, I got you. Don't worry about it. Let me clamp this down here. Here's a mask. Here's some goggles. Hold this Dremel. It works like this. And they carved out the bonk. And they were just delighted that they didn't have to, wasn't a big thing. We didn't have to sit down and chat and like do stuff. They could just quickly carve bonk into their paddle and go on about their business, which was very fun. And I think they were really happy about how it turned out. And they did a great job. On the complete other side of the spectrum was another student who I'm pretty good friends with, who came into the Makerspace with really nothing, and sat down with me for maybe an hour and a half. I was like, I would like to make a ukulele, but I don't know how. I haven't really done any woodworking. I've never made anything like that before. I play the guitar, but I don't play the ukulele. Can you help? And I was like, sure, I can help. I've also never made an ukulele. I also don't play the ukulele. But we spent about half a semester doing research together, sending files back and forth. He'd ask me, what does this symbol or that symbol mean in this plan? Does this mean it's glued? Hey, I found this type of wood glue that people use. What do you think? And it was a really long, fun, drawn-out process where I learned a ton. I don't think he ever quite finished it, but he got a long way, and that was also really fun and gratifying.
I do remember seeing the progress of that project, and it was definitely a lot of fun to watch. So I'm glad that you got to be heavily involved in that. And are there, maker-related topics or skills that you're interested in learning more about?
For myself.
For yourself, yeah.
I really, really want to learn a lot more about metal casting. I've done some of it. I made a sand casting jig in the engineering shop, but that's a whole world that I'd love to get more familiar with. I'd also love to get more knowledge and experience with lost wax casting. Also, last semester, for the first time, I used some small desktop milling machines. They were carbide 3Ds. And then also the big industrial Hawes mill in the engineering shop. And those are both things that I think would really complement the maker sphere. And it was hugely exciting to dip my toe into the world of that type of fabrication process, coming from doing much more 3D printing, where you quickly get a lot of detail very easily in a not very robust material, as compared to a little bit more effort, a little bit more risk in terms of costly mistakes to machines and parts, to then, just like 3D printing, produce a beautiful, precise metal piece that came from your mind. I'd love to learn a lot more about that. Also, jewelry making. I did a little bit of jewelry making in high school and really loved it, and haven't come back to that. And that's something that I would really love to combine with the other processes that we have in the MakerSpace that aren't typically really associated with traditional jewelry making, like laser cutting and water jet cutting and 3D printing and things like that.
Well,
screen printing.
That's a lot.
I think it's super cool. I've never done any screen printing, but I think it's awesome to make very cool visual things people can wear for like very quickly and cheaply. Yeah, those are some things. There's a lot.
Those are great skills, and yeah, your comment about the CNC routing and its correlation with 3D printing, and how 3D printing is more of a build-up sort of additive process, while CNC routing is more of a reductive process where it's carving away material, but you can get similar results with very different materials and scales. You can go a lot bigger with CNC routing. And all of the other things you mentioned are exciting processes too.
Yeah, I was like, one of the big reasons that 3D printers are seen in makerspaces now, and we're seeing less milling machines, is that 3D printers are safer. It's kind of hard to break a 3D printer if you're not doing anything reckless. And it is easy to be very careful and still damage a mill. But as time goes on and they get a little bit smarter and a little bit better, I wouldn't be surprised if in the near term we see CNC mills that are comparably foolproof to some 3D printers.
Yeah, that would be an exciting development to see. So then that brings me to my next question, which is, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy during our COVID-19 quarantine period?
So I'm up here in far northern Idaho, in the Knicksu National Forest, on a small bit of private land that my family has, with my friend Sharon, who's also a makerspace tech, my parents, my girlfriend. So we're living in pretty close quarters. So it's been tricky to do schoolwork on Zoom and things like that because there's no internet. no cell coverage. And we have to come to town. You can see we're doing this now in a van to get internet and things like that. So we have been having a lot of fun chopping wood to stay warm because we're doing all our heating with wood. Building some garden boxes. Playing in the snow. Learning how to ride motorcycles in the snow, which is a whole new shebang. I bought a really beefy hand router and a hand planer yesterday to start making some fine aesthetic boxes and things like that, and also to do routing and planing on big boards. So we have an Alaska mill and a lot of trees, deadfall trees. So we've been processing that wood. Alaska milling, which is an Alaska mill, is a jig frame that you clamp a chainsaw into that allows you to make big boards out of a tree trunk. But then with the addition of a hand planer and a big router, you can shape and knock down those rough planks into beautifully finished timber and put beveled edges or even make floorboards and things like that. I've also been making a lot of wine and just got a still strictly for the purposes of making isopropyl alcohol for hand sanitizing purposes because there's a massive shortage of hand sanitizer. And we've been doing a lot of sewing. Just got some plans yesterday for making masks out of fabric. And I sketched up some plans for using HEPA filters that are still plentiful and easily accessible for things like air conditioning and ventilator systems and air intakes into the cabin of vehicles, or even vacuum bags and things like that, that already have wire in them, and made a system for cutting those up to sew into a mask. So you have an actual HEPA filter mask that is basically what an N95 mask is, as opposed to just some natural fiber. Also been doing a lot of reading and hiking, and enjoying the peace and quiet away from the hustle and bustle of Swarthmore.
Well, it sounds like you haven't had an issue keeping busy. Yeah, and I've seen people using that for masks, and I've seen people also make filter pockets so that you can insert and then remove and replace those and launder the masks.
The skin. My worry though is that if you have something, if you have one material that's kind of permeable, and then you put another material into it that's less permeable, like the filter, I worry that the air will just avoid the thing that's harder to go through and just slip through the bit that's easier to go through. Unless, for example, you use something like weather stripping around the inside, soft, comfortable weather stripping, to form a great seal around the portion that has the greater filtering value or something like that.
Maybe. Well, if you come up with a new schematic, you'll have to share it with us.
Okay.
This is a really tough question. So, and it can be more than one answer, but what is your one favorite thing that you've ever made? This can be inside or outside of the MakerSpace.
Wow. I think the thing that made me feel like a maker was on my 8th birthday. My uncle bought me this little soldering kit that was in 2 halves that had like a little infrared light and an infrared receiver, and it was like a security system where if you break the light, it beeps. And I soldered this thing up with like huge, big, lumpy poor solders, and didn't work. And that experience of it not working and just being so fired up and desperately excited to figure out what was wrong, and that it felt like, oh, I was actively excited that it didn't work instead of bummed out. I think that was one of the most important things I've ever made. And I never fixed it, never got it to work. And I only years later did I look at it again. This was like maybe 5 years ago. I looked at it again and I was like, oh yeah, those are just crap welds where there's like some air gaps and it just didn't connect. Mm-hmm. Another very exciting and important making experience was making a motorized bicycle in high school, where I was kind of 14, 15, just approaching the period where you get to drive a car. I was thinking a lot about cars and how they're like hugely important, and the way many of us live today, kind of like a symbol of, you know, having mobility and freedom and being able to go places and get to work, get to school, actualize yourself and do things. But like, I didn't quite understand how they worked. And they seemed like these big, complicated, scary machines. And in the process of buying piecemeal, I didn't get a kit. I just bought piecemeal carburetor, spark plug, cylinders, cylinder head, clamps, chains, sprockets to put together this engine on a bike. By the end, I was like, whoa, this is what cars are. I kind of get it. And demystified some of that. And then also had a vehicle to get around with before I could drive. So that was the first thing I made that like actually had a huge impact on my life in a big way. That was exciting and fun.
Yeah, that's major for a teenage boy, especially. Yeah, and I like your first story and how it sort of reminds us that, you know, we learn as much from our failures when we try to do something as much as our successes.
Absolutely. Failures are awesome.
Yes, they are. And thank you so much for joining us today and telling us a little bit about yourself. Hopefully the folks at Swarthmore got to know you a little bit through this interview, and I'm glad to hear that you're staying busy and keeping safe out in the mountainous terrain that you are existing in.
Yeah.
Stay safe on your motorcycle in the snow. Definitely. And we'll catch up later, okay?
Yeah. And to everyone back at Swarthmore, stay healthy and keep making. Now is the time to make, not the time to stop.
Absolutely. That's a great quote. I need to put that on a t-shirt. Maybe you can
silkscreen
it on.
Yeah. I'll figure out how that stuff works.
Yeah.